Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, How a Half-Hour Run Turned into a 4-Hour Trip. So I work for a union trucking company. This company hands out discipline letters for everything they possibly can. However, the rules are set in a contract, so since they can't fire you outright, all they can do is give you letters for any break in the rules in hopes of one day terminating you. So that is where this story starts. My boss, whom I usually get along with, got a bug up his butt one day and decided to issue a batch of letters all centered around a Friday workday. I got 6 separate letters. Failure to follow instructions ×3, leading to a 3-day suspension. One was for not properly filling out my paperwork with all the details he wanted. One was for not filling out my vehicle inspection log. One was for not performing a proper pre-trip. The other 3 letters were for safety, resulting in another 3-day suspension. Not using 3 points of contact entering and exiting vehicles. Not securing the trailer with a lock. Not wearing a reflective vest when outdoors. So Monday rolls around, I file a grievance for each letter plus one on top for harassment. However, it's time to follow the rules to the point of malicious compliance. Monday, I am wearing all neon yellow clothing. I am almost blinding in the sunlight. I made sure to place all 4 limbs on the vehicle each time I got in and out, essentially throwing myself through the door each time. I brought a lock that completely protects the shackle. Meaning when I left it on upon my return, they had to get an angle grinder to take it off since bolt cutters couldn't touch it. As far as paperwork, I was sent on a short half-hour run. It took 4 hours. I did a detailed pre-trip and inspection report that ended up being 4 standard print pages long. It took 2 hours and included things like flashlights, tire pressure gauges, and everything else in the DOT regulations. As well as a half-hour in the garage for things that needed repaired. I submitted the rest of the paperwork with full details, including timestamps for each bill, in triplicate. Edit, almost forgot, it took so long that the destination was closed by the time I got there, so I had to bring the stuff back anyhow. The next one is titled, The Nachos Side Cup is Supposed to Have Cheese in It. During my freshman year of college, I discovered that the snack shop at the Union building had self-serve nachos. They let you put as many chips in the tray as you wanted and then cover them with the processed nacho cheese like other convenience stores. The best part is that it was a flat $1.35, which made a quick and very cheap snack that I liked. I created my own tray and was reasonable with the amount of chips and how much cheese I put on them. I usually put a bit of cheese in the tray's built-in dipping cup also. I had done this many times until one day the clerk charged me $1.70. I asked if the price had gone up as I had exact change and didn't want to use my card. She informed me that it had not, but that she was charging me an extra 35 cents for that side of cheese. Meaning the cheese I put in the dipping cup built into the tray. I tried to explain that these were nachos and meant to have the cheese in the cup per the design of the tray. But she wouldn't budge, and so I clarified that if I had chips in the cup, that would not be a side of cheese. She acknowledged that it would not, and that was all I needed. I was determined to come out on top of this one, as I and my friends had other negative experiences with the food company at the university. The next time I got the nachos, I systematically hand-picked the flattest chips I could get and stacked them like books on a shelf to cram as many as possible on the tray without stacking up vertically. I wanted to make a point but not cross the line where they would argue I was overfilling the tray. I was sure to put chips in the cheese cuppers and then covered the whole thing with more cheese than I needed. Sure enough, they had to ring me up at the normal price. So I got more bold. I started to throw in a few curved chips every now and then to create a cavity. Well, then I would fill that to the top with cheese, especially in the little cup. By the time all the chips were gone, half the tray was still full with cheese. My friends even started asking me to go make them nachos, which I was happy to do. This went on for a few weeks till they eventually stopped selling nachos. I was sad to see the nachos gone, but it was a fun ride while it lasted. All because of the strict policy to charge 35 cents if you didn't have chips in the cheese cup of the tray. The next one is titled, Shining on My Landlord's Face While Being Good on the Environment. The situation for my college years, I have decided that the best option for me, since it's the most affordable, would be renting a room in someone else's apartment. This guy wasn't ill-intentioned, though he was pretty strict, not only with his family but especially with me. Since we were living under the same roof, using the same power, gas, water, we had agreed that he'd pay 2/3 of the monthly bills and I'd pay the other 1/3, which seemed fair to me since he was living only with his wife. They were expecting a baby, though, the event, one night I was chilling in my computer as I usually do when I heard a bang in my door. Obviously my landlord. "Hey, your room seems to be kinda bright, how many watts is that light bulb?" I had no idea. I don't even know what a watt is. Must be an energy unit of some sort. I unscrewed the fluorescent bulb, a pretty standard one. I just grabbed the first one at the store and read the label. 26 watts, I don't even know what that means. "That's too much, take this one. We gotta save energy." He handed me a 15-watt one, and as expected, it was about half as bright as the previous one. Reading on paper was a pain with this one, and everything seemed as if it was on twilight. This went on for a couple of days, when the action happened. I was on the supermarket doing pretty supermarket-y stuff, when I noticed a part of the lighting section I hadn't noticed before. Maybe it wasn't even there. It was LED lights. Out of curiosity, I walked towards one, and read the label. 4 watts. 4 watts? You got to be kidding me. If a 15-watt light bulb can barely manage a sloppy vague lighting, what will a 4-watt one do? Now, this store, I don't know if this happens elsewhere in the world, has a conveniently placed light bulb socket so you can try your light bulbs before purchasing them, in case they're damaged or something. I walk over there and slide it in and I'm amazed. It shines almost as much as the 26-watt one. But hey, 4 watts is a pretty wide margin for my 15-watt requirement, right? I go back to the stand and pick up an 8-watt one, then head over to try it. It's really, really powerful. Even with my eyes closed, I can't face it because there's so much light it goes through my eyelids. This is the one. I put it in my shopping cart, check out, then go home and install it. Just to try, I leave my room and close the door. It shines through the seams in the doorframe, especially at the bottom. I'm extremely satisfied with this, and I still don't know what a watt is. The next one is titled, "Do you think I can't handle a cappuccino?" I'm a barista at a small local coffee shop in small-town Ohio, and we regularly have to explain to people that our cappuccinos are not the same ones you get at Starbucks or Speedway. We make traditional cappuccinos, which means that you have espresso, a little bit of steamed milk, and then foam the rest of the way. This varies a little bit depending on some preferences, but the idea is a lot of foam. So this guy comes in with his family. He's the last to order and asks for a 20-ounce cappuccino. When someone asks for that size, we always explain it to them because that's usually 10 ounces of foam, and if people aren't expecting that, they get cranky. So I ask, "Have you had a cappuccino here before?" He leaned over the counter, presumably to intimidate me, and spat, "Do you think I can't handle a cappuccino?" "Okay, you got it, 120 ounces cappuccino." I made his drink, which took longer than he probably liked to make a ton of foam, and handed it to him. When he took the cup, I saw that he noticed it was a lot lighter than he expected. I started making some other drinks but kept watching him sideways as he opened the lid and sighed, grinning a little bit as he realized his mistake. I love this memory especially because no one had to walk away angry. The next one is titled, "You told me not to go in there, no matter what." I used to work at a children's hospital as a caterer, delivering trays of food to the patients, which were not entirely children, but also pregnant women and elderly women. If any of you have ever worked in a hospital or visited someone with a contact communicable disease, you know that you have to suit up in the gown, gloves, face mask, and a head cover to enter the room, and you will mostly likely require clearance from the head nurse or current attending physician on staff prior to entering as well. For about a week, there was a patient, an elderly woman who was just incredibly sweet and fun to talk to, who had MRSA and had what we referred to as the contact warning on her door, meaning I had to suit up every time I entered the room with new, clean bits all over. Which didn't bother me because it takes all of a minute. Rhonda was the head nurse of the floor, and she and I were super cool with each other, so I asked for prior clearance on Monday that week and got cleared for entry with no hassle for the entire week, and got it in writing because that's sometimes necessary there, because my job was in a way time sensitive, as we had to make sure each patient was served within a given time frame, and having to chase down the head nurse is a giant pain in the ass. On Wednesday, though, I got stopped coming out of the patient's room after delivering breakfast while the patient was asleep by Dr. Butthead, a stuck-up young lady who had been on staff at the hospital for less time than I had, and I had only been on staff for 2 months. Dr. Butthead and I had a quick chat that went like this: "Butthead, do you see the sign on that door, boy?" Me: yeah, I'm wearing all the required components to maintain a sterile environment." "Why do you ask, miss?" Butthead: "So you know that you have to have clearance from someone to enter." Me: "I have clearance from Rhonda to come and go as I please. Got it in writing on the cart if you need to see it." Butthead, condescending tone: "Sweetie, Rhonda isn't the attending physician, now, is she?" Me: "She's the head nurse, which is also mentioned in the notice for clearance, miss." Butthead: "Look, if you want in that room, you need my clearance, and that patient's condition is far too contagious for someone who isn't a doctor to be in there." Me: "What do you expect me to do, then?" Butthead: "You need to call me on my pager whenever you need to enter that room so I can do it for you, because you're going to end up killing someone. You cannot enter that room, no matter what." Me: "Alright. I'll call you when I need you then." For the rest of the day, I called her to make any interaction I needed with that patient. This included getting the meal orders 3 times, could have just called the patient but didn't because screw you, Dr. Butthead. I left the patient's meal trays on her desk and absolutely hounded her on her lunch break to make sure they were delivered within my time frame, and even got the nursing staff and housekeeping involved by making them call her to get clearance due to her earlier decree of special privilege. After my 8th time calling her and having the dinner order delivered while I pushed my cart through the hall, she came to me and asked me why I had harassed her all day to do my job for me. And I said, "You told me not to go in there, no matter what, and that I needed to refer to you for anything relating to this patient. I was just following your orders, miss." She never once complained about my clearance notes from Rhonda again, oddly enough. The next one is titled, "In which I shut down the mall." This one comes from a number of years ago, when I worked security for the most popular mall in the area. It was the mall of choice of college students, suburbanites, and mall walkers alike. It at the time had 6 major retailers, 5 with 2 floors, a full gym, and about 50 stores besides, not counting the food court and kiosks. Now this day fell on a Friday that began one of the worst winter storms the state has seen in decades. It was so bad, that the city nearby declared a state of emergency. Anyone caught driving without a valid reason was given a ticket. Every cop car had a tow truck behind it, and in front of every cop car was a plow truck. Driving home after my shift, I spun out on the ice, going 30 miles per hour. The road was 100% straight and flat. It was really bad, and people's safety was at stake. Now, as anyone in the business knows, malls have contracts with their stores on how long to stay open for, and if they are not open during those hours, they can be fined. So, me working the closing evening shift before the night guy came by at 11 p.m., had a ton of people asking if they could close early, even before the storm hit. It was maybe 2 p.m. at this point. I of course radio the head of security asking him about it. He relays back that mall management, who have already gone home for the day, have decided to see how bad it gets before making a decision. Now, the director's shift ends at 2 p.m., but he decided to stick around to see how things went down. The sergeant was also on duty until 7 p.m., so it was the 3 of us. I think someone had called in sick that night, but I can't remember. As time went on, the mall became more and more deserted. The director became more and more concerned. He was a true man of integrity, absolutely concerned and dedicated to the safety of the mall and its tenants. That mall management wouldn't take heed to his concerned tone over the safety of the mall, and fact that it was pretty much deserted of anyone who would care if a store is open, left him pretty depressed. He finally left at 4 p.m., with the word from management being the following: greater than, if anyone asks you, you can tell them yes, that they can close early. But don't go around telling everyone. It was total bullcrap. The rain was turning into snow, and the weather had the temperature falling to 10 degrees in the span of 10 hours. With that, the director hung his head, and left. The sergeant, feeling useless as well, went to do paperwork he needed to get done, leaving the mall to me, to hold down my empty, ice-covered fortress. I, however, had a different plan. I began walking the mall, stopping at every single store. If the manager wasn't already at the entrance waiting for me to come by, I would ask for them. The exchanges would look something like this: greater than me, ask me if you can close early and go home. Greater than manager with confused look, why? Greater than me in a flat tone, just do it. Greater than manager even more confused, can we close early? Greater than me, yes you can. Greater than manager absolutely questioning what reality he was living in, why did you have me ask you? Greater than me as I begin to walk away, my orders from mall management are not to tell anyone unless they ask me. Without fail, their faces would contort, trying to make sense of what I just said, and furthermore, what I left implied. And, within 20 minutes, every single shop in the entire mall was closed. So I locked up the entrances, cleared out any wandering patrons, and retired to the dugout. The sergeant left not too much longer, without any words shared. The tension and stress said enough. I moved my car right next to the service entrance for the office and spent an hour and a half digging myself out once my shift came to a close. The rest of the story: my first shift after this was the midday on Monday, and I just so happened to catch the director as he walked out of the offices to the security dugout. As soon as he saw me, he broke into a rare smile, which he tried to cover up. He couldn't say anything while trying to hold back his laughter and remain professional, but I heard through Sergeant Grapevine that mall management were initially trying to call the director out on the mall closing when they said specifically not to tell people unless they asked. Well, prior to this meeting, a number of still confused store managers talked to the director during his morning rounds. I'm told he laughed pretty hard, and was greatly relieved that I had found a loophole. So, when mall management tried to call him out, he was able to, with a mostly straight face, relay to them that we had indeed only told people they could close when they asked. Thing was, I went around telling everyone to ask me. The next one is titled, Boss Said I Couldn't Borrow Crew from Other Agencies Anymore. This happened about 4 to 5 years ago. I'm an EMS dispatcher. My company used to have a single helicopter, in addition to our decent-sized ground transport fleet. We got extremely used to stealing the nurse from our helicopter at night for ground transports that needed a nurse, since we had a shortage of nurses. We partnered with a much larger air ambulance company, around 20-ish aircraft, for a few years before we gave up and sold them our operation. We provided the bird, medic, and nurse. They provided the pilots and everything else related to running the missions, fuel, maintenance, hangar fees, etc. After about a year of them running the helicopter for us, someone decided that we shouldn't be asking to borrow a flight team to do ground transportation. So my boss calls a staff meeting. The new rule was, if we don't have a resource available, just give the call to their dispatcher, and if they want a ground transport, they'll ask for one. We specifically asked about transportation between two of our hospitals. One is a trauma center, the other is not. These hospitals are less than 2 miles apart. My partner and I were rather pointedly told to stop looking for absurd hypothetical problems, to just do what we're told. So that same evening the absurd hypothetical problem happens. Trauma victim was driven into the wrong hospital by family. I don't remember exactly what was wrong, and even if I did, I'm not risking a violation by telling here, but the patient needed a nurse. The drugs required to sedate someone for a ventilator require a nurse in my state. Of course, we don't have one scheduled. I look at my partner, he looks at me, we both crack up knowing what's most likely to occur here. But hey, I was literally told to shut up and do what I was told. So I did. I called the other agency, gave them the info necessary. About 2 minutes later, our medic calls in from their base. Are you serious? Why isn't this a ground transport? So I read him the 3-line memo. He swears in disgust and hangs up. I'm expecting a phone call requesting ground transport. So I call down to the truck bay and get someone working on making sure a truck is ready with full fuel for a 2-mile run, full oxygen, working inverter, etc. But the call never comes. Instead, I get the helicopter on frequency calling final approach. Now we're really laughing. The supervisor for the street crews calls in, he can tell us what to do, but he isn't actually in our chain of command, our boss only worked days, to ask why the helicopter is coming in. So I tell him I'm just following the very direct order I was given, which he was present for. He snorts and hangs up. Now I'm really expecting a call to move a rig up to transport by ground. Still no phone call. Aircraft takes off, calls airborne and final in the same radio call. Final means landing zone in sight. Now other coworkers start catching wind of what's happening and start calling to see if we're really doing it. After about 2 hours, I get a phone call from my boss's boss. "What the hell are you doing?" "Exactly what you told me to do when I asked about this exact situation about 6 hours ago, sir." He hangs up on me. Next day, new memo. Dispatchers are to use their judgment. I'm still giggling about this years later. And before anyone gets all up in arms, no, the patient couldn't be billed for the ride. Ground transportation was clearly indicated and available, so whether my company or the other, it was written off. But hey, now we're allowed to make judgment calls again. The last one is titled, "I Tried to Be Nice." About a decade ago I worked stunners installing alarm systems for one of the planned summer alarm companies. One of our best salesmen was notorious among us technicians for leaving partially completed paperwork or promising the customer things that he wouldn't write down on the paperwork. Which meant if we installed it we'd get charged for the equipment and it'd come out of our commission instead of his. So we'd have to call him before we could do our job and try to verify what he wants, adding a large amount of time to our jobs which cut into our profits. We'd talk to our lead and he'd talk to the sales manager, but it never had any effect because that guy was the one bringing in the big bucks, so they aren't going to mess with him. One day I get to a job he's sold and the customer is telling me that he'd been promised equipment on all his doors and windows as well as smoke and co detectors and glass break sensors. The paperwork had less than half of that, and so, of course, I have to call the guy to try to figure it out. When I get in touch with him he is super upset and yells at me after I barely start talking that he's trying to get sales and I need to just do my job, and hangs up. Now if I install the system that he promised I literally lose money. If I install the system he authorized in the paperwork the guy gets upset and gets rid of it. And I only get paid off he keeps the system past the trial date. So I came back and he is still upset and finally says fine, just give the guy what he wants. And hangs up on me again. So I can my boss. I feel him what he said and say I'm gonna ask for your permission before I do this because crap is going to hit the fan. He says to go ahead. I install the full system for this guy. Nothing moves in that house without us knowing about it. It costs like 46 points when a normal house was 8. Meaning the salesman will be losing a good $400 for selling a system to that house. I don't know what actually happened with the house, but my boss stood up for me so I didn't have any consequences, and the guy did improve on his paperwork after that. So small victory there. Thanks for listening.